You ever think back to those nights when Roman Reigns walked into the arena and the boos were so loud, you actually felt bad for the guy?
I was booed historically. And like I said before, I was tunnel visioned and reach a point like this.
That Roman was the next guy that was going to be shoved down our throat.
This is the guy they want us to cheer, but we're not ready to cheer it.
Fast forward a little, and now people can't get enough of him.
These people, these are all my people because they acknowledge me.
Everyone acknowledges him as the Tribal Chief. Imagine rolling into an arena where thousands of die-hard wrestling fans have already decided they can't stand you. Your music hits and you emerge. Instead of cheers, you're hit with this ear-splitting wall of boos. For Roman Reigns, that was pretty much life, show after show, during his early singles run. WWE thought, hey, this guy has it all. The look, the lineage, the athleticism. He's the next face of the company, no question. But the audience just wasn't buying it. Maybe they felt it was too forced. Maybe they missed the Shield dynamic. Or maybe they just love rebelling against WWE's Golden Boy. Whatever the reason, every time Roman showed up, fans crossed their arms and booed like their lives depended on it. The company tried everything to get fans on board. New catchphrases, new ring gear, even bringing in The Rock to give him the stamp of approval. Nothing worked. The crowds were relentless. He'd go to WrestleMania main events year after year, and the reaction barely changed. If anything, it got more intense. They thought more exposure would solve the problem, but it felt like fans just doubled down on their rejections. You've got to imagine that messes with a guy's head. Here's Roman, working his butt off, delivering main event matches, checking all the boxes that a top star should check. But the audience wouldn't cut him any slack. Eventually, you reach a breaking point. Are you going to keep swimming against this tidal wave of hate, or do you use that to your advantage? And that's exactly where Roman found himself. Something in him clicked. He realized that being the squeaky clean hero wasn't his path. If the fans are booing you, might as well give them a reason to keep doing it. And maybe, just maybe, they'll respect you for it.
There ain't a man alive who can touch my button. If I had one, you wouldn't be able to locate it. Can't no man knock me out. I'm tired of being humble. I'm tired of letting people think they got a chance. The Tribal Chief is head and shoulders above everybody. This is my show. This is my camera. I run it all.
That was the moment the seeds were planted for the Tribal Chief. Instead of trying to force a cookie-cutter good guy act, Roman started to think about who he really was. A guy with deep family roots. A guy who didn't need to pander because he was confident in his own skill set. And a guy who could harness the audience's negative energy and twist it around. That set him on a collision course with the entire WWE universe. Little did they know, the unstoppable force known as Roman Reigns was just warming up. Okay, so if you're going to talk about Roman's journey, you can't ignore the giant elephant in the room, his family. The Anoa'i clan is basically wrestling royalty. We're talking about the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika, Yokozuna, Umaga, Rikishi, the Usos, and of course, none other than The Rock. This is a Hall of Fame bloodline, a pipeline straight to the top of the wrestling world. Growing up in that family means the pressure starts practically from birth. Imagine going to a family reunion and half the people there are legendary wrestlers with multiple championship belts in their trophy cases. You're not just living up to a family name, you're living up to a dynasty. When Roman decided to pursue the ring, it wasn't, will he be good? It was, will he measure up to decades of champions before him? Here's the twist. Roman initially tried to break away. He played football at Georgia Tech, even had a shot at the NFL. Maybe he wanted to prove he could succeed on his own terms. But when the football dream didn't fully pan out, fate brought him back to wrestling. And once he stepped into WWE, the shadow of the Anoa'i family was everywhere. WWE saw the family name, saw Roman's look, and said, he's the next big star. But Roman was essentially starting his career already being compared to The Rock, Yokozuna, and Umaga. That's a tough act to follow. Any slip-up, any moment of weakness, and people would say, he's not as good as the rest of his family. Talk about carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. But here's the thing. That legacy is also what eventually gave Roman the key to unlock his tribal chief persona. Instead of running from the family heritage, he embraced it. He took all that lineage, the pride, the tribal affiliations, the honor code, and infused it into his character. It wasn't a gimmick. It was his real-life heritage, dialed up to 11. Once he leaned into that part of himself, that's when the magic started to happen. It gave him a sense of authenticity that you just can't fake. Let's pause the wrestling narrative for a second and talk about the night Roman dropped a bombshell on all of us. October 22nd, 2018. Roman walks into Monday Night Raw, not in his usual gear, but in street clothes. His face is serious, and the crowd senses something is off. Then he says,
My real name is Joe. And I've been living with leukemia for 11 years.
You could hear a pin drop in that arena. For all the times fans booed and chanted Roman sucks, in that moment, none of it mattered. He relinquished the Universal Championship because he had to go fight something much bigger than any wrestling storyline. Suddenly, the man behind Roman Reigns was front and center, and fans saw Joe Anoa'i as a human being, battling a life-threatening illness for the second time. That changed everything. No matter how jaded or cynical you might be as a wrestling fan, hearing that kind of news hits hard. The same arenas that once rained down boos were now giving him standing ovations and chanting his name out of genuine concern. Hashtag Thank You Roman started trending. Even the hardest critics admitted they wanted him to come back healthy. While Roman was away, wrestling felt weird. The show went on, titles changed hands, new feuds popped up, but there was a massive hole where Roman used to be. You realized how integral he actually was to the whole machine. Off-screen, he was going through chemo, facing the biggest fight of his life, not for belts, but for more days on this earth. Then came February 2019, and Roman returned with the greatest possible news. He was in remission. Walking back into that WWE ring, he was greeted with cheers that he had never fully heard before. It was real, heartfelt applause, not the sarcastic or forced kind he'd gotten in the past. The crowd had witnessed a man conquer something way more brutal than any wrestling match. This real-life battle changed how people viewed Roman. Instead of the corporate puppet, fans saw a warrior, someone who'd been through real pain and came out stronger. That shift in perspective laid the groundwork for everything that followed. When Roman eventually returned as a heel, fans didn't just see a character turn. They saw a man who had fought life and death battles, giving him a level of credibility you can't script. So, Roman's back, healthy, ready to roll. Most people expected him to be the conquering hero, riding this massive wave of goodwill. But Roman was like, yeah, I'm gonna do something else. Enter SummerSlam 2020, where Roman showed up out of nowhere and aligned himself with Paul Heyman. Yes, the same Paul Heyman who'd managed Brock Lesnar and other notorious heels. Overnight, everything changed. Gone was the big dog who smiled at the crowd and tried to be everyone's hero. This new Roman was colder, more calculating, and had zero interest in winning the crowd over. He called himself the tribal chief, demanded everyone acknowledge him, and basically turned into this unstoppable final boss you only see in the last level of a video game. Here's the kicker. Fans loved it. The same people who booed him for years started thinking, wait a minute, this is actually awesome. Why? Because it felt authentic. For the first time, Roman wasn't trying to fit a WWE mold. He was leaning into his Samoan heritage, using the family ties with the Usos and broadcasting this vibe that said, I run this place, and if you have a problem with that, step up. The Bloodline storyline took off like a rocket. It wasn't just Roman bossing people around. It was about family drama. The Usos, his real-life cousins, were torn between loyalty to their champion cousin and their own pride. Throw Paul Heyman into the mix, arguably one of the best talkers in the history of wrestling, and you have an angle dripping with tension, betrayal, and real emotional depth. In the ring, Roman's matches got more brutal and methodical. He took his time, picked opponents apart, and carried himself like a king. There was no more pandering, no more cheap pops. He'd stroll in, do his business, and stroll out, leaving devastation in his wake. It was the exact opposite of what WWE had tried to force for so many years. And ironically, it was working better than anyone could have predicted. If you ever want a crash course on how to go from forced babyface to mega heel, just study Roman's run as the Tribal Chief. He turned the volume up on all the elements people used to complain about and owned them completely. That slow, confident walk, now it was menacing. The short, decisive promos, now they were chilling. The family ties, now they were a weapon he used to manipulate his own blood. This is the art of the heel at its finest. Roman wasn't cracking jokes or trying to be a flashy villain. He was more like a mafia boss, methodical, cunning, and holding on to that Universal Championship like it was the crown jewels. He'd look people dead in the eye and say, "Acknowledge me." And it wasn't just a catchphrase, it was a threat. Even better, Roman knew how to use vulnerability to his advantage. Every once in a while, you'd see a flicker of doubt in his eyes, just enough to remind you he's still human under all that bravado. Then he'd go right back to being the cold, calculating Tribal Chief. It was like he was letting you peek behind the curtain just enough to get hooked before he slammed it shut again. And talk about ring psychology. Roman's pacing shifted. He'd slow the match down, talk trash in his opponent's ear, and control the tempo. Suddenly, every single move felt like it meant something. He'd hit a Superman punch or a spear, and you'd believe that was game over. It's not that he became a different wrestler physically. It was that he refined the way he told stories in the ring. The fans who once chanted, "You can't wrestle," started chanting, "This is awesome," and it was no accident. Roman was giving them exactly what they wanted: edge, dominance, and authenticity. Now let's fast forward to when Roman decided having just one belt wasn't enough. He unified the WWE Championship and the Universal Championship, hoisting both titles in the air like a proud lion showing off his latest kill. If people thought he was unstoppable before, now he was basically Thanos with all the Infinity Stones. And here's the funny thing. The less Roman shows up, the more people crave him. WWE started booking him as its rare attraction. He's not wrestling every week. He's not cutting 20-minute promos on every show. His appearances are like special events, and fans treat them as such. It's like the old school approach of less is more, and it's turned Roman into an even bigger deal. As the undisputed champion, Roman's reached that final boss status in WWE. Guys like Brock Lesnar, John Cena, Cody Rhodes, they've all lined up, and almost every time, Roman's found a way to beat them. The question isn't just who can dethrone Roman, it's how is anyone even going to come close? The Bloodline storyline has extended its fingers into almost every corner of WWE. The Usos became the longest reigning tag champs in company history. Solo Sikoa jumped into the mix. Superstars like Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, Cody Rhodes went on to main event WrestleMania, and Paul Heyman continues to orchestrate behind the scenes. It's like Roman's empire is growing bigger by the day, and everyone else is just trying to keep up. At some point, you'd think fans would get tired of the same champion holding the gold for over 1,000 days. But ironically, it's made the belts feel more important. When Roman defends them, it's an event, a chance to witness history. Every match has that, "Is this finally it?" tension, reminiscent of The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak. You're glued to the screen, wondering if the Tribal Chief's empire is about to crumble, or if he'll once again solidify his claim as the most dominant champion of the modern era. So, where does that leave us? Well, Roman Reigns has gone from being the big dog that nobody wanted to the Tribal Chief that pretty much everyone acknowledges, whether they like him or not. The journey wasn't smooth. It involved deafening boos, real-life battles with leukemia, navigating family legacy, and figuring out that being the good guy isn't always the best path. The key to Roman's unmatched aura is that he finally embraced who he truly is. He stopped pandering, stopped reading off a script that didn't fit him, and tapped into something raw and authentic. He's the final boss now, the measuring stick, the guy that elevates every storyline just by being in it. Love him or hate him, You can't ignore him. And that, my friends, is the mark of a true generational superstar. It's also a lesson in perseverance. Roman had every reason to give up. Fan backlash, serious health issues, the pressure of a legendary wrestling lineage. Instead, he used every challenge as a stepping stone. He took the boos and turned them into the backbone of his new persona. He took a life-threatening illness and turned it into an anchor of realness that earned fans' respect. He leveraged a family dynasty that could have overshadowed him and made it the heart of his character. Now, he stands before us as the undisputed tribal chief, the longest reigning champion in modern history, a locker room leader, and arguably the biggest star in wrestling today. When that music hits and he walks out alongside his wise man, you can't look away. You know you're about to witness something special, a slow burn drama, a tense standoff, or maybe even another shocking betrayal. The real magic is that we don't know how or when this reign will end. Eventually, someone will step up to dethrone Roman, and when that happens, it'll be one of the biggest moments in WWE history, precisely because he's been so unstoppable. But until that day, we get to ride this wave of a character who found his calling not by trying to be the hero everyone expected, but by becoming the villain that shook the wrestling world to its core. So that's the deal. From the big dog nobody wanted to acknowledge, to the tribal chief commanding the entire wrestling universe to acknowledge him, Roman Reigns has rewritten the script on what it means to be a top star. He's proven that authenticity, patience, and sometimes embracing the darkest parts of yourself can create the kind of legacy run that people will talk about for generations. Whether you are booing him from day one or cheering him all along, you can't deny what he's accomplished. He's changed the game, given us must-see storylines, and turned that nuclear heat into the gold standard of modern wrestling. And if there's one thing you should take away from his journey, it's this. Sometimes the path to true greatness starts by walking straight into the storm and coming out the other side as the storm itself. Acknowledge him or not, but you can't help but notice that Roman Reigns is operating on a different level. And that's exactly how he built the most electrifying, unstoppable, flat-out dominant aura we've seen in WWE for a very long time. But here's the twist. This entire saga wouldn't be half as epic without the man who broke out of Roman's shadow and became a full-blown main event star, Jey Uso. Wondering how he pulled that off? Jump over to the next video, where we'll dig into Jey's journey from tag team standout to main event Jey Uso. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one.